Welcome back once again to another edition of Forecast Lab. Yes, the atmospheric river in California is still at it. This is a very quick sneak peek at what it looks like out in the Pacific. Warm front heading up towards Northern California, cold front down into the Pacific towards Hawaii, and an occlusion back to the northwest. So much of the strong energy is well offshore, but California getting a chunk of that this afternoon. Looking at the surface chart for this afternoon, a Pacific system in southwestern Kansas raising some blowing dust in the panhandles, cold front extending to the southwest into the Guadalupe Peak area, and a dry line from DFW down towards Del Rio. You can see the dew points behind the dry line in the 20s and 30s. So this is really not too different from what we see in the springtime. We're just lacking the moisture and instability. But to the west, temperatures drop from 65 at Amarillo to 47 at Albuquerque. Let's go ahead and work our way from east to west, focusing first on the northeastern U.S., a cold afternoon, temperatures in the 20s and 30s, but the winds starting to come around to the southeast to the west of this ridge. So that's the ridge axis extending from Canada, and the winds coming around to the southeast as this next system approaches from the west. Down to the south, thunderstorm chances increasing in Mississippi. But out in Florida, a very dry day. You can see those dew points down in the 30s and 40s. Key West had a precipitable water amount of only 0.38 inches. And there it is. Behold the Key West sounding. Dew points struggling in the 50s, but dropping off rapidly to below -10 to -20 as you go up towards about 2 to 3 kilometers and much drier above that. And you can see up at the very top there the computed values, precipitable water in centimeters, 0.96 centimeter, which is 0.38 inch. Shifting to the west, there's our dry line, the approaching cold front, and the wind components definitely indicative of westerly winds. And with that, we get that downslope flow and the adiabatic warming temperatures coming up into the 80s, and we're expecting a high of 86 at Mason, Llano, and San Saba in the Texas Hill Country. And there's a quick look at the AWIPS plots for Texas and Oklahoma, exactly as a Weather Service forecaster would see it. You can see the plentiful moisture in East Texas down I-35, but a quick look at the high-resolution rapid refresh model does show that the depth of that moisture is rather limited and it is capped. But as we take a look at that moisture, dew points in the 60s, 61 there at Waco, 61 at Tyler, dropping off to 47 at DFW, 39 at Mineral Wells, I think that is, and down to 29 at Abilene. So this is a classic dryline presentation. The clouds, however, consist mostly of mid and upper level clouds, so cirrus, altocumulus, that kind of thing, and maybe some lower convective elements right there. That definitely looks forced, and with those dew points right around 32, that's not going to support deep convection. But still, the atmosphere is trying. There's certainly some good lift available. And further out to the west, you can see the temperatures are in the 80s, dropping off to mid-70s, and then down to 72 at Lubbock, and that's where we get into the Pacific air. And I would say that Pacific air probably right in here, something like that. You can see some rain-cooled air there at Clinton with 56 over 31, probably evaporative cooling taking place there, and around it, temperatures in the 70s and 60s. And there's a look at the panhandles, Colorado, and Kansas, showing that very dynamic weather associated with that Pacific system. The dry slot feeding into Amarillo, Guyman, and Dodge City. Then we've got the wraparound, the Kama cloud, all the way into eastern Colorado. And with that, we've got the upslope flow, the moist air coming around into the higher elevations. Also got the cold Canadian air involved as well, working down towards the south, and that's a good setup there for snow. And further down to the south there, starting to pick up some blowing dust where we have the unstable air, the gusty winds, the strong jet stream level winds being transported down to the surface. So that's being picked up around Guyman to Slapout and some other little patches down into around, I guess that'd be about Perryton and down towards Dumas. And there's the AWIPS satellite and surface data for Colorado and Kansas. Very warm around Liberal, Kansas, 65 degrees there. The dry slot moving up towards Garden City and Dodge City. But on the other side, out around Denver, down to 31, we've got snow coming down from Akron down to Lyman and into the plains east of Pueblo. The road conditions around Denver were pretty treacherous this morning. And other hazards in northeastern Colorado. This graphic thanks to the Weather Service in Goodland. The northern plains has been contending with fog for about a week now. That's it right there, extending all the way up towards Calgary and Edmonton and down into Iowa. That's starting to clear out a little bit as we get this gradient building into the Dakotas. Winds picking up to about 15 knots, and you can see that clearing coming in right there. Some problems on the traffic cameras in Wisconsin. This is Interstate 94. There's what the road conditions look like this morning. All of the purple, that's going to be slippery roads. The red is ice on the roads. But as of right now, most of the problems are confined to the far northwest part of the state. This is the NT Microphysics channel showing Montana, the Dakotas, and the Canadian prairies. So starting out last night, you can see the yellows pop up. That's the stratus and fog showing up as we get into the nighttime hours. It doesn't show up during the daytime, but there it is, pretty extensive. And continuing through the overnight hours, you can see it building into some parts of North Dakota and Montana, covering a large area up into Canada and down into Minnesota. So that's about the extent of coverage as we go into about 6 or 7 a.m. And that's due to a very stagnant air mass, a lot of residual humidity, and some clearing, helping to drop those temperatures and help the air reach its dew point temperature. In the northwestern U.S., strong Pacific system off the coast of Oregon and California. High wind warnings are in effect from the southwestern coast of Oregon down into the Shasta Valley of Northern California. Wind gusts are mostly below 50 knots, but we're expecting some isolated gusts, possibly up to about 65 or 70 in the higher elevations. Here's a graphic that just came out hours ago. This totals the precip from the 26th through January 10th. And we've had totals all the way up to 14 inches in San Francisco, about 10 inches around Sacramento, and much higher totals in the mountains where we've got that orographic lift. So 20 inches of precip, and you can imagine how much snow that is when we convert that over. Yeah, here's the graphic for that. This is from the UC Berkeley Central Sierra Snow Lab, showing the season's totals. So widespread 100, 200 inch amounts, which I guess it's going to be 10 to 15 feet of snow out in the higher elevations. And their laboratory right there had 72 inches, about 6 feet over the past week. 22 of that was over the past 24 hours. And some severe weather yesterday morning as the squall line moved through during the pre-dawn hours. That produced a tornado where this red dot is located. That's going to be with this wrap-up in that squall line. You can see it has kind of a non-linear appearance. That's always an indicator that something's going on. And we switch over to the velocity and slow that down, and we can see the couplet developing right here. The radar located to the northwest. So these are going to be outbounds and these are going to be inbounds. It reaches the peak intensity right about there. Yeah, right there. So that's going to be maybe about 5 miles away from the touchdown location. And then gradually as the circulation becomes non-detectable, that's where we get that touchdown on the ground. And it was very brief. Mostly just some oak trees and pine trees that lost branches and limbs. but certainly strong enough to produce F1 damage. So those are the major highlights in the lower 48. Let's head up north. Still picking up that very broad low pressure area off British Columbia. Up in Alaska, conditions are mild for that area that's neither warm nor cold, but up to the north, some strong upslope flow along the Brooks Range producing some snow. But more significantly, heading out into northern Canada, this is a major burst of cold air coming down from the high Arctic. We talked about this, I think, back on Monday or back on Sunday on the supporter stream. But you can see those winds coming up, 20 knots sustained with temperatures well below zero. And we're tapping that minus 20 to minus 30 air up there near Rhea Point, Resolute, and Victoria Island. And the main thrust of that cold air will be into northern Quebec. It's not going to come very far south. The track of that cold air running about like this, so we will see those temperatures drop significantly going into the rest of the week. And some records to talk about in Russia. Looking at Siberia here, the Okhotsk Sea right there, Siberia itself, Yakutsk is somewhere roughly right there, and the town of Zelinda right there, minus 80 degrees. This is yesterday morning, and this is the first time we've seen minus 80 in Russia since 2002. They've seen it as cold as minus 90 on some occasions. That was about 100 years ago. I'm not sure if it was that station. It was somewhere in that area, and typically the cold pole stations are located right there as well. And you can see, yeah, minus 71, so definitely sharing some of that extreme cold. And these values are in Fahrenheit. I've plotted this with my digital atmosphere software. That's over on the weathergraphics.com site if you are curious about that. And this is what the map looked like several hours ago. Zelinda came up to minus 66, but we're still seeing some extreme cold further out to the east. I'm not sure exactly what stations those are, somewhere around Oymyakon or Semchan. Those are normally extreme cold stations, and they are definitely in the icebox. You know, guys, I think you deserve a little bit more than that, so let me just identify that station real quick. I've gone into digital atmosphere here. I pulled in data for 3 hours ago, and you can see minus 76 at this station right here, which is still bone cold. So what I do is I drag over that, I go up to the top and go to this QC inspector. That's how you can fix bad data. But I'm using it to identify the station, and I can see that's WMO station 24691. So what you can do is go to the old Google, and you can put in 24691 WMO station, and that'll put you on the right track. So this is obviously not South Africa. This is going to be probably the station right here, Tompo, in the Russian Federation, and that looks to be correct. And you can actually take that and put it into Google Maps. Of course, you need to fix up the Latin long so Google will accept it. So we just change this over, put in the symbols that we need, and make it look like this. And that'll pull up our location. And we zoom out. Yeah, I'm seeing Tompo in there, and it gives us a few photographs so we can see what that area looks like. So, yeah, that's probably a very cold place to be living, I would say. Maybe one of these days we'll run a contest where the winner will get a free ticket to Tompo, Siberia, in the middle of January. Does that sound good? I don't know. We'll think about that. Still very active out there in the Pacific. Strong jet stream just north of the Hawaiian Islands, located right there. And hurricane-force winds down at the surface. Those will be driving towards Hawaii, not the hurricane-force winds, but the swells generated by those winds that'll be heading right for Hawaii. And they're going to be seeing those surf issues really start to increase over the weekend. Off of California, deep wave. Let's see how that works out over the next couple of days. Another bit of energy heading up into California for Friday. Meanwhile, in the U.S. itself, we haven't really been able to focus on much of the continental U.S. weather because of all the weather out west. But we can see that this trough here develops in the Great Lakes area around Thursday and moves off to the East Coast for Friday. So that'll be picking up some of the energy from that frontal system in Oklahoma and Kansas as that lifts up towards the northeast. Then going into the weekend, stormy once again on the west coast. Looks pretty good around the rest of the country, especially in the central U.S. with this ridge. And then we'll just focus once again on that never-ending stream of Pacific air, carving out a trough in Texas for Monday and a deeper one for Wednesday and Thursday. Our last look at the upper level patterns will be at 500 millibars. This is going to be the heights and vorticity, and that's showing those strong dynamics up there in the Texas Panhandle. We're looking at 18Z for today, so most of the strong lift out ahead of this shortwave right there. So no wonder we're getting dust, pressure falls, and destabilization out to the east. Ridging in California, not enough to shut down the precip, and of course more energy coming in from the east. And if you're located in other areas, feel free to focus on your area to see what's happening. So this disturbance in Oklahoma will continue to move eastward and deepen a little bit, and that will produce some thunderstorm problems in the southeastern U.S. Strong amplification of this ridge, amplification of this trough offshore going into Friday, and the next bit of energy coming into California for early Friday. And then we go into the weekend. Precip chances continue on the east coast. We'll look at the surface charts for that, and you can see this very tight core of jet stream energy heading right for California. There's the difluent pattern out ahead of it, and the jet max comes right into the central California coast for Saturday night going into Sunday. And obviously they're going to have impacts all the way down towards Los Angeles and San Diego. And then that'll cross the Rockies for Sunday and Monday, and we'll focus on that for the Friday webcast. But you can see that it's not over for California, just more energy bit after bit coming into that state. And this next chunk is positioned to drive right through the state, but the wind flow will be more northwesterly. And there is what we have this afternoon. This is the surface, pressure, and 1,000 through 500 millibar thickness. So the systems are pretty easy to place, stay on the warm side of that gradient. Same thing with the larger scale system off California. A little more complicated with that occlusion. And that gives us our general pattern. You can also put in the high pressure areas if you like. And that's what we're starting out with this afternoon. So we're going to see most of the energy out off California move to the northwest. That'll affect Oregon and Washington as well. And meanwhile, out east, here comes our system out of Oklahoma, driving cold air into Arkansas and Texas, and the warm front lifting up into Ohio and Indiana. So we're looking at tomorrow morning. Then going into evening, Thursday evening, we're seeing another front coming into California. Not exactly sure where that's positioned. Maybe something like that. Kind of a complicated structure there. And the system in the eastern U.S. broken up into a couple waves and looks about like that right there. So warm air advection precip out over New England with a warm conveyor belt lifting north, the cold conveyor belt wrapping around the backside into Ohio. And with the increased instability, we'll probably see some thunderstorm problems through much of the southeastern U.S. However, with that high building in, 1035 millibar high from Canada, it will rapidly dry out and cool down. So going into the weekend, this is going to be Friday night here. Plenty of cold air filtering into the eastern U.S. Strong system moving up the St. Lawrence Valley, producing snow through Montreal up to Quebec City. And out west, I think I might have missed it, but I think a system just moved through California. I can see some thermal troughing right there, indicating some cold air advection on the backside. And that connects back up into another system like that. kind of a somewhat of a stable wave right there offshore. But that will head into California, and you can see a 987, 986 millibar low offshore. And looks like a lot of the energy is in the mid and upper levels. You can see it crossing the Four Corners area going into Sunday and Monday. Meanwhile, here comes another system, just lining up one after the other. So that's the structure on that. That's going to be for Sunday night. And that comes into California. You can sort of see it crossing the Rockies and part of it on the tail end coming through Los Angeles. There it goes. Yeah, there it goes through the Rockies into the Four Corners for Tuesday and emerging out into the plains for Wednesday. And we'll have to kind of keep our eyes peeled for any potential severe weather problems around midweek. Yep, another one to the northwest. It just never ends. So just a real quick check of the IVTs. Go past the weekend into next week. There's the 14th, and there's the 15th and 16th. So I don't see any super high values, especially with that flow turning more northwesterly. That will cut down a little bit on the moisture supply, but we're still well up into the weak to moderate atmospheric river range. And there's the 18th. So yeah, these will certainly add up over the course of the next week or two. Okay, I did not really intend for this to be a 22-minute program, but it kind of worked out that way. Let me know if you like that additional content that I added during the surface analysis. We looked at some graphics off of social media, some images of what's happening. Let me know if that's too distracting or if you actually like that. So we're still trying to work out the products that we're going to use and fit them in with these AWIPS graphics. Also want to thank Dave Serena. Thank you very much for your support, our newest patron. And remember, we do not monetize this channel, so all of your support is essential. Between my books and software, I am spread pretty thin, so I do rely on your contributions to help make up that shortfall. Because these programs do take about 4 to 5 hours every day to produce. And if you don't believe me, we started recording effectively about 1:30 p.m. We're just now getting done, and it's 4 p.m., and that does not take into account the prep work and the charts. Those take some time to produce. And with this being pretty time-consuming, that's why I do rely on your support. Anyway, hope you have a great evening, and we'll see you back here on Friday. Take care. Bye-bye.